Today's reading is from Acts 2. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly a noise came from heaven. It sounded like a strong wind blowing. This noise filled the whole house where they were sitting, and they saw something that looked like flames of fire. The flames were separated and stood over each person there. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and they began to speak different languages. The Holy Spirit was giving them the power to speak these languages. There were some religious Jews staying in Jerusalem who were from every country in the world. And when they heard this noise, a crowd came together. They were all surprised because each one heard them speaking in his own language. They were completely amazed at this. They said, "Look, aren't all these men that we hear speaking from Galilee? But each one of us hears them in our own language. How is this possible? We're from different places. Parthia, Media, Elam, Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, the areas of Libya near Cyrene, Rome, both Jews and those who had become Jews, Crete and Arabia. But we hear these men telling in our own languages about the great things that God has done." They were all amazed and confused, and they asked each other, "What does this mean?" But there were others making fun of them, saying, "They've had too much wine." Peter stood up with the 11 apostles. In a loud voice he spoke to the crowd. "My fellow Jews, and all of you who are in Jerusalem, listen to me. Pay attention to what I have to say. These men are not drunk as you think. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. But Joel, the prophet, wrote about what is happening here today. He wrote, 'God says, in the last days I will give my spirit freely to all kinds of people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, your young men will see visions. At that time I will give my spirit even to my servants, both men and women, and they will prophesy. I will show miracles in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire and thick smoke. The sun will become dark, the moon will become red as blood, and then the great and glorious day of the Lord will come. Then anyone who asks the Lord for help will be saved.'" Today we celebrate Pentecost, and it's a day normally marked in churches by children colouring flames and attaching them to crowns and running around wearing them. And if you're lucky, they're waving some streamers or some ribbons to also represent the noise of the wind from Pentecost. It's a day we celebrate. Some will call it the church's birthday. I'm not sure about that one. Those followers of Jesus weren't born today. They've been following and learning from Jesus for 3 years. But so instead of a birthday, I prefer to call it the day of transformation, really. If you've ever watched DIY SOS, 10 years younger, anything like that, this is the day of the great reveal. And as I always say in these programmes, this is the new start, the beginning of a new life. At the beginning of today's reading, we find those followers of Jesus exactly where we left them last week. Remember the time between Ascension, when Jesus physically left them, and Pentecost today, they were all together in that room praying. They were praying. And I think it would be fair to say that they were probably feeling sad, perhaps scared, worried about the future, and really not sure what to do next. These are all emotions that we're familiar with, and perhaps even more so at times like we're in at the moment. But today is Transformation Day. They start off scared and hidden in that room, and they transform to excited, surrounded by crowds of people, and vocal. All because of the power of the Holy Spirit. Now, some people hear this story and they become nervous. It all sounds a bit too weird, a bit too supernatural. What if the Holy Spirit takes hold and makes you do all these things that you don't want to do? And it's understandable, but it means you haven't grasped the truth of the story. The Spirit hasn't taken hold of them like in some alien movie. The disciples still had their own free will, and there's no sign of them, or any of the onlookers for that matter, any of them being scared. Rather, there's a feeling of excitement, of hopefulness, of joy. What Jesus had said would happen has happened. Once again, what he has said has come true, all because of the Holy Spirit. And so there they are, all together, praying, and as we hear, they hear the sound of a rushing wind and see what looks like tongues of fire. And then the Spirit gives them the ability to speak in other languages. And they must have been loud and excitable, as it tells us they were heard and a crowd begins to gather. Quite a multicultural crowd, by all accounts. But the people in that crowd heard them speaking about the great things that God had done in a language they could understand. And that's the relevant part of this story today. Yes, there's the miracle of the disciples speaking in other languages, but it's for a reason. It's so that others can hear the message in a language that they can understand, no matter where they're from or who they are. Today I wonder, as I do every Pentecost to be honest, do we speak about our faith in a language that other people can understand? And I suspect that we often don't. It is just so easy to slip into jargon. Some of you will have heard me say before that we need to be succinct. Most people don't want a long theological explanation about what we believe. They're just vaguely interested. And so we need to be able to tell others that information in fewer than, I would say, 100 words. So that's my challenge for you this week. I know I've said it before, but it doesn't hurt to revisit it, because as our faith develops, so does our explanation. And at different times it means different things to us. So our challenge this week is, can you explain your faith to others? Can you explain what Jesus means to you? What it all brings to your life in fewer than 100 words. On this Pentecost, I pray that the Spirit fills you with that same joy, that same excitement, that same courage that those first followers of Jesus had. I pray that you have the enthusiasm to share what you know about what God has done, to share that with others in a language they can understand. And share it not so we can grow our congregation or keep our church buildings open. Those first followers of Jesus weren't worried about things like that. But share it because you are so excited that you can't help but tell others.